Nigeria, a nation forged in fire. From ancient kingdoms to a continent's heart.
Tempered by time.
All right, welcome. Today we're taking a deep dive into the absolutely epic history of Nigeria. We're going to journey from its ancient, sophisticated kingdoms right through the fires of colonialism and conflict to its modern-day identity as a true African powerhouse. So how are we going to tackle this huge story? Well, we've broken it down into 5 key parts. We'll start with its deep pre-colonial roots, then move to its creation by Britain, look at the turbulent years under military rule, explore its current democratic era, and finally ask what the future might hold.
So let's start at the beginning. And I mean way, way before any colonial maps were ever drawn. We're talking about an era of powerful, innovative, and deeply historic African empires that really shaped the continent.
And just look at this timeline. It really puts things into perspective, right? For thousands of years, this region was a hotbed of advanced societies. The knot culture was creating this incredible terracotta art more than 3,000 years ago, and Igbo-Ukwu had mastered intricate bronze work centuries before the famous Benin bronzes. You know, the sheer diversity of power and achievement here was just incredible. You had the Benin Kingdom, famous for its magnificent bronzes and these massive city walls. Seriously, one of the largest man-made structures in history. Then you had the Oyo Empire with its powerful cavalry and a really complex political system. And the Kanem-Bornu Empire, it lasted for over 1,000 years. The takeaway here is that this was not some empty land. It was a land of powerful, thriving kingdoms.
Okay, so you have this incredibly rich tapestry of kingdoms, and then everything changes. Not gradually through centuries of evolution, but pretty suddenly with the arrival of European powers and one single decision made in an office somewhere.
This year, right here, 1914, is the turning point. A British administrator, Lord Lugard, decided to amalgamate, basically to mash together, the northern and southern protectorates. Now why? Well, it was mostly for economic and administrative convenience. He took over 250 distinct ethnic groups with totally different languages, histories, and ways of life, and forced them into one single entity called Nigeria. So how do you even begin to govern this massive, brand new country? The British used a system they called indirect rule. The idea was to govern through the existing local leaders. Now, in the north, where they had these powerful centralized emirs, it kind of worked. But in the east, which was much more decentralized, it was a total disaster. The British just appointed their own guys, warrant chiefs, who had no real traditional legitimacy. And boom, you've just planted the seeds for deep, deep regional divisions that are honestly still felt today.
And the economy? Well, it got a complete makeover, and not in a good way. The entire system was rewired to serve one purpose: extract resources and send them to Britain. They built railways and roads, sure, but those tracks didn't connect Nigerian communities. No, they connected the resource-rich interior to the ports. It was all about getting things like palm oil and cocoa out of the country as fast as possible, which created these long-term dependencies and really hurt local food production. Okay, fast forward to October 1st, 1960, independence.
To the Nigerian national anthem, Mr. Albert Congo raises the flag of the new nation.
Nigeria, we hail thee, our own dear native land. Though tribe and tongue may differ, in brotherhood we stand. Nigerians old and proud to serve our sovereign motherland. Our flag shall be a symbol that truth and justice reign. In peace or battle honored, and this we count as gain. To hang on to our children
was electric, just full of optimism and hope. But that hope, man, it was tragically short-lived. All those fractures and cracks that were created during the colonial era, they were about to break wide open. And things fell apart fast. I mean, the speed is just dizzying. Within only 6 years of independence, the whole country is plunged into chaos. You have a military coup, then a bloody counter-coup, horrific ethnic violence, and all of that leads directly to the eastern region seceding to form the Republic of Biafra. And that, of course, sparked a brutal civil war.
And the human cost, it's just staggering. Up to 3 million lives were lost. Think about that for a second. And the truly heartbreaking part is that the vast majority weren't soldiers. They were civilians, and many of them died from starvation because of a federal blockade that cut off all food supplies.
The end of the war didn't bring stability. For the next 30 years, Nigeria was basically stuck in this cycle of military dictatorships. And here's the crazy irony. This is when the oil boom happened. Suddenly, the country was flush with cash, but that wealth became a resource curse. It fueled absolutely staggering corruption that made the elite rich and deepened inequality for everyone else. It all kind of culminated in the shocking annulment of the 1993 election, which everyone agreed was free and fair. But then,
Economists call the resource curse. I mean, think about that for a second. What if finding unimaginable wealth was the worst thing that could have happened to your country? It sounds crazy, right? But for Nigeria, discovering all that oil kicked off a chain of events that would totally reshape its economy, throw its politics into chaos, and really test the soul of the nation. Let's get into it. Get a load of this number, $770 million. That's not the total. That's how much oil money Nigeria was making in a single month back in May of 1974. It was an absolute flood of cash that was supposed to launch the country into this amazing new future. So where did it all go? To really get what happened, we gotta rewind the clock. The 1970s, man, they kicked off with so much hope. Nigeria was practically swimming in oil money, and it really felt like the sky was the limit. You see, it was like a perfect storm. The 1973 global oil crisis made prices go through the roof. At the same time, Nigeria's production just exploded. All of a sudden, it was the world's 7th largest producer, a huge player on the world stage. And the government started spending like crazy, pouring billions into new roads, schools, everything. It seemed like a golden age was just beginning. So, the big question is, how did this incredible blessing turn into such a heavy burden? Well, the answer is in this really powerful economic idea. It's called the resource curse, and it's this bizarre, counterintuitive situation where a huge flood of money from just one thing, like oil, can actually end up poisoning the rest of the economy. It doesn't make sense on the surface, but when you look at Nigeria, you see it play out with, well, devastating clarity. And this right here, this shows you just how dramatic that change really was. Before all the oil money, Nigeria had a pretty diverse economy. Agriculture was king, it grew its own food, it was developing other sectors. But then oil came along and everything got flipped on its head. It became what they call a monoproduct economy. Basically, all its eggs were in one basket. Agriculture got ignored, and pretty soon, a country that used to feed itself was having to import food. And this chart, wow, it just hits you over the head with the reality of it. In 1960, farming made up 60% of Nigeria's entire economy. Just 20 years later, after the oil boom really took hold, that number crashed to below 25%. The entire backbone of the traditional economy was just gone. Look, when that much money floods into a country, it's not just about economics. The political fallout was, well, it was explosive. When the prize is that big, the fight to control it becomes a matter of life and death. And you can see that struggle play out right here. The fight over that oil money fueled this vicious, decades-long cycle of instability. Nigeria was just caught in this revolving door of military coups. A new general would take over, promise to fix things, but pretty soon they'd fall into the exact same pattern of corruption, all driven by the irresistible pull of that oil cash. And this quote, it just says it all, doesn't it? That oil revenue, instead of being used to build up the nation for everybody, basically became a private bank account for the powerful. Billions, with a B, were systematically stolen, making a tiny group of elites incredibly rich, while most Nigerians saw almost no benefit at all. But, these big economic and political stories, they always have a human cost. And in this case, the heaviest price was paid by the very communities living on top of the oil, in a place called the Niger Delta. And this Right here is the tragic irony of the whole situation. The wealth was literally being pulled from under their feet, but almost none of it ever made it back to them. The money was piped out of the Delta, but things like schools, hospitals, and prosperity were never piped back in. And the result? Just a legacy of total devastation. You had decades of oil spills that poisoned the water and the land, destroying the farms and fishing that people had relied on for generations. This wasn't just neglect, it was a deep betrayal. And it sparked so much anger that it eventually boiled over into armed conflict. Tragically, it even led to the execution of activists like Ken Saro-Wiwa, whose only crime was daring to speak out against it all.
But then, in 1998, something totally unexpected happened. The dictator at the time, Sani Abacha, suddenly died. And that created this power vacuum, this opening, which paved the way for a return to democracy and launched Nigeria's longest ever period of civilian rule.
So since 1999, Nigeria has maintained over a quarter century of uninterrupted democracy. And this is a monumental achievement. We're talking multiple peaceful transfers of power. The 2015 election was especially historic. It was the first time ever that a ruling party peacefully handed over power to an opposition party that had won. A huge moment. So this brings us to the central paradox of modern Nigeria. On one hand, the country is battling these immense challenges. Deep-seated corruption, devastating insecurity from groups like Boko Haram, high poverty rates. But on the other hand, at the very same time, it's producing these incredible global triumphs. It's home to the world's second-largest film industry and a booming tech scene. It's this amazing contrast. And just take Nollywood, their film industry. It's not just a cultural thing, it's a commercial powerhouse. This chart says it all. It now commands over half of its own domestic box office. It's beating Hollywood in its own market. That's a testament to its incredible appeal and its growing influence around the world. At the same time, the tech scene in Lagos has just exploded. That number, $9.8 billion, is the estimated value of its tech ecosystem. It has become Africa's Silicon Valley, producing these multi-billion-dollar unicorns like Flutterwave and Paystack. This is homegrown innovation creating massive value.
And this new energy isn't just in business, it's also political. In 2020, the hashtag #EndSARS movement saw the country's youth use social media to organize the largest protests in Nigerian history. They were demanding accountability and reform in a way that was completely unprecedented. A new generation was finding its voice. All right, for our final section, let's pull all of these different threads together. The deep history, the colonial fractures, the modern paradoxes, and see how they all come together to define Nigeria's present and its future. These contradictions really are at the heart of the modern Nigerian experience. I mean, think about it. It's a major oil producer, but many of its citizens lack reliable power. It's Africa's largest economy, yet it struggles with massive youth unemployment. It's a democracy constantly fighting a battle with corruption. These are the daily realities its people have to navigate. Ultimately, the story of Nigeria isn't set in stone. I think this quote from our source material captures it perfectly. Its destiny isn't pre-written by its past, it's being actively forged every single day by the choices of its people. And that really brings us to the ultimate question, doesn't it? Nigeria has the largest youth population on the entire continent. This immense human capital, this creative, entrepreneurial, dynamic generation is without a doubt its greatest asset. The unfinished story is in their hands, which leaves all of us wondering, what incredible new chapter are they going to write?